Our presenters today are Dirk Bensloff, Director, Worldwide Partner Business Development, Jim Zelnowski, Senior Systems Engineer, our principal and primary presenter today, and Brandon Berg, Senior Manager, Worldwide Partner Programs. To get us started, here's Dirk.
Hi, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us, and Happy New Year for those of you who haven't spoken with us since 2018 started. This is our first Bloxcast for SEs in January of 2018, and we're really excited about the opportunities that we have ahead of us. I have the privilege to be your MC, so to speak, for today, and working with Jim, and really pleased to be able to present some of the thoughts relative to what is happening here. Jim, if you wouldn't mind advancing the slide, that'd be great. So you might have heard, if some of you have been on the previous Bloxcast from last week and others in the previous months, we talk about a concept of the core bundle, and really what this is an amalgamation of a number of our core network services offerings plus additional features and functionality relative to load balancing, reporting, and of course security. And so what we're talking about today is really to tie in that aspect of why the security piece is so important and how it can be relevant to you and what you're doing with your customers today, as it ties back to the technology and the intelligence that we have that really makes a difference here in this particular space. So as we take a look at it, Jim's going to walk you through taking a look at the risks of DNS security, or where there are risks, how it looks from your customer's perspective, from your perspective, some checklists to take a look at. You may not even realize how some of those risks really are present in the system, and what we can and cannot do about that. Some exploits that are happening relative to DNS today, which may or may not be obvious to us today. And then also, of course, how do we address some of those things? So Jim's going to start off with a really quick architectural review to set the stage for how we're going to take a look at today and how assessing DNS security risk for us today. Thank you.
Thanks, Dirk. When you look at an architectural review, you've probably seen a lot of this or some of this in the past as far as how customers have their premise firewall DMZ set up, where they have intrusion detection systems, firewalls, proxies, antivirus, and URLs that protect their internal systems from the outside internet. And as we move into today's environment, the present changes you're seeing is a movement more towards next generation products and cloud security environments, where we have cloud processing with CASB systems, the cloud access security brokers to protect access to the resources, next generation firewalls that do deeper packet inspection, DLPs, anti-malware, intrusion protection systems. So customers are advancing their security, but one thing's missing from this particular slide as it relates to protecting the internal network to the outside network, and that is there's nothing to really protect against DNS. And that's what the focus of today's session's about, is sitting down with your customers and going through and figuring out where we are with DNS. So Dirk, take them through some of the current situations that we have.
Yeah, prior to coming to Infoblox, I was also working for some next-gen firewall companies, and DNS is often something that is just not really talked about too much. It's just sort of part and parcel to, it's something that we protect. But what's interesting about that is DNS sort of sits in between, mainly in the networking side, and we don't talk about it so much on the security side, but it is obviously a very big threat vector there. There's still silos in between network and security teams, so it's a little bit of a, who's going to touch this hot potato, if you will, relative to addressing it, because as you know, network teams have different needs and requirements and reasons for being than a security team does. So that's part of that balance that we have to strike. And then I think, and this is when I was working for this next-gen firewall company as well, we thought we handled it, right? This was something, and we got this, never really came up in conversation, but as I came to Infoblox, really understood where the threat vectors were. And really to mitigate that, and to take a look and try and find these things, most of these efforts are manual. That was one of the biggest surprising factors for me as well, and how to find it and what to do about it. It's a purely manual task. And they're probably not looking at various indicators just because the thought process is, oh, that's being handled. So there's little context to what is happening with the threat, when and where and why, and there's really not that many opportunities to do anything to mitigate that. So Jim, or thank you, Rick. Yeah, let's go with our first poll question.
Sorry for the typo here, but this is,
Do you discuss?
do you discuss DNS security with your customers? Are you seeing the poll?
I see it here.
Okay, so folks, go ahead and select the correct answer for you. Do you discuss DNS security with your customers? This is just a yes or no question to get us started. Okay, let me end that and display it.
All right, pretty overwhelmingly
Perfect.
positive.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that kind of leads us into our next concept is assessing the risk. You know, when you sit down with your customer, specifically around DNS, the best way to start is reviewing the gaps from the outside of the network inside to the inside network. A good place to start is checking that secure DNS practices are in place. You know, controlling that DNS communications, what a lot of customers don't really talk about. And I'll talk about that next, and then we'll go into some other areas that need to go deeper down in getting an understanding of what exploits are used with DNS protocol and reviewing each one of these, and looking at why DNS queries are so important when you have indicators of compromise that you're trying to determine. And the last thing we'll talk about real briefly is testing data exfiltration and how we can do that to prove to our customers that they do have a significant risk as it relates to DNS with their network.
Jim,
so let's start off by...
Jim, let's go
ahead,
back. And
Rick.
there was one poll question that we forgot to pick up here, and that was just the reason why they're discussing security with their customer, and that might point to some things as we go forward. Okay, so the second question is up. When you do talk to your customer about security for DNS, what is the context? Select any of these options that resonate with you. What comes to mind? What are your customers interested in? Oh, this is going to be an interesting one. Okay. I think the proportions are staying steady. So let me go ahead and reveal the poll. Here we go.
That's an interesting response. So looking at their DNS infrastructure is exactly what we want them to do, is to review, you know, what they currently have in place and what changes they can make that'll actually shore up the security around the DNS communication path, which leads actually really into the next slide really well, which is actually looking at the communication path as it relates to DNS. If you look at normal path is when a client sends a DNS query to the internal DNS server, if it's not authoritative for the zone, the domain that you're trying to go to, it normally is just then forwarded out, in a lot of cases, directly out to the internet so that the DNS is actually resolved and responded back to the client. One of the things that you'll notice here is that an input within the DMZ is a device, which is just a recursive DNS server with security that will help protect DNS. And this is what we remember a lot of times refer to as a DNS caching server. And one of the things that you need to do, obviously, if the customer hasn't done it, is to not allow any to port 53 from the outside in. And here's where a lot of things kind of fail, is on the internal side, is only allowing known DNS servers such as this authoritative server or forwarder, to use the DMZ DNS cache server, not allowing the customer to make, if they have, which they normally do, have the authority to make changes to the DNS server entries in their clients, to go to 8888 Google or any other DNS server that would bypass the system totally. You want to make sure that everything's locked down. And one of the things that this will do also is by forcing your proxies and gateways, such as HTTPS proxies and so forth, and email gateways, because they use DNS also. You now have created a choke point where you can set up rules and policies. The other thing that we want to make sure that a customer has is visibility to the query source, and we'll talk about some of the capabilities that we have as we move on. But what can we do here at this choke point? One of the things we can do is we can add signature packet inspection. This is setting up with Infoblox our advanced DNS protection, which will look at specific DNS type of tunneling techniques, such as iodine and a number of other DNS tunnels that have specific signatures associated with them, that we can block those. The other thing that we can do at the choke point is we can do reputational list of incidents, known domains and IPs that could be blocked, and we can investigate those incidents of compromise. This is using our Active Trust database, which has over 65 million, and you can load up almost as many as 5 million indicators that could be blocked or redirected with our response policy zone. And the final product that can be inputted at the checkpoint is for a zero-day solution, where we don't know the domain, we don't have a signature of the tunneling, and this is our threat insight behavioral learning machine analytics that we have in our system now. All three of these can run at the same time at the choke point, which would then give you that protection of DNS running outside to in. Dirk?
Yeah, so as we take a look at kind of where things happen, so how is it happening today? And this is what was particularly interesting for me. So Jim, can you talk a little bit about how the registrar security, how it's exploited there? That'd be great.
Yeah, so one of the first exploits that we want to talk about is hijacking DNS at the top level domain registry. Now this is actually still occurring. No matter what security still go in place, we're still seeing things that are hijacking things like Twitter, Bitcoin. They're previously, redirecting users from the New York Times website. And really, what we have here in this example is showing that that top-level domain registrars, which are in the hundreds, if not thousands, are the agents for the customer that put in the resource records, such as the IP addresses that will be returned for a specific domain or a particular company. So one of the things that you can do is you can, if a customer is got their own external DNS servers in the DMZ set up here, they can actually have our DNS integrity check, which will actually go out to the top level domain that these are just some examples of some of the registrars that put in those records for you. If they've been compromised, the data in the top level domain, you're going to actually see that mismatch that occurs between our database and what's actually up in the registry. And this will flag the customer to know that there's been some type of record that's been modified, so that this will stop customers from being redirected from the websites or that they've set up in the case of preventing a hijacking attack.
So Jim, from the DDoS perspective, I know there are many shapes and flavors of DDoS attacks. How does that relate to DNS?
So you can see here we have risk management, mitigation for DDoS attacks, and these are of serious concern with the customer. There's a large percentage of companies that that have experienced this and have downtimes of more than an hour, and it really does impact the bottom line. There's a significant dollar amount you can see from this research that was done by Dimension Research here last October that shows that doing something to prevent a DDoS attack related to DNS is worth maintaining your brand and maintaining your business and not the loss of dollars. So as an example of that, back about a year and a half ago, there was an attack called the Merari botnet. And what this did, it attacked Dine's DNS servers. Now, what is Dine? Dine is one of the top hosted DNS authoritative providers out there. And what the attack did is it essentially hurled an immense amount of traffic, about 1.2 terabytes, and what that rendered is about 80,000 domains unresponsive for those customers that had this hosting provider for their external DNS. And in essence, the impact was it took the web down, the internet down. You can see all these companies that were affected by this. Now this is not something that actually is now preventable. This attack will happen again. And to give you an idea how this kind of works here is that under normal circumstances, these name servers here for a DNS hosting provider would have a quick response time. And when malware attacks those servers with a large amount of traffic and a legitimate query that goes to those servers to get the record responses, would be under distress. So you would see extremely high milliseconds, if not no responses from those servers. So this actually causes no resolution. So there's no way to get to the websites for that customer to have their business done. One of the solutions that you can do is you can offer a mixed host hosted for the customer can still use Dine or any other external hosted providers, along with some on-premise servers. So what you see here different is that putting in, let's say, some Infoblox external DNS servers on-premise and their DMZ will still allow the hosted provider to be the response for the records. In other words, you can see the milliseconds are 17, 12 for normal responses from the provider, and it's a little higher from the name servers that would be in the DMZ for the customer. But under duress, if an attack happens again, you're going to see that the providers are now having no response, and the round trip time will be shorter for the name servers that are within the customer's DMZ. So the legitimate query response will get back to that customer, so they'll still be able to get to their websites, because it's a high probability that the attack is occurring to the hosted provider, because that's the mass, that's the large number of hosted domains, whereas this customer is still going to be able to maintain control. Will it happen again? Absolutely, because there is no protection that's going to stop another massive high bandwidth attack. These cameras and these recorders have very weak security. So using a mix between hosted name servers and on-premise name servers is really a good way to give your customer a solution that, that they can protect themselves the next time this attack occurs. And you can see there's an RFC 2182 that talks about selecting secondary name servers, and really what really it can be is the hosted can send zone transfers down as to the DMZ that the customer sets up our servers in as secondary name servers, or vice versa. The thing to look out for is some proprietary features that the hosted provider may have, which might be some load balancing. So if that's the case and that can't be worked around, we do have some options within our internal DNS servers that will help the customer. We have a feature that's called fault-tolerant DNS caching, and what this will do is this will hold over the record within our cache for a specific period of time, so that everybody, let's say internally in the company, that needs to get to resolve to outside resources like Salesforce.com, things like that, will still be able to get there because we still are holding those records in cache. Now that by default is about 5 seconds, but you can select that for a longer period of time, which I would probably do maybe 10 seconds or more. And if you're using our cloud service for recursion, our Active Trust Cloud, it also offers a smart cache function to help as an option and to protect it with this feature. Now, if the customer is putting external DNS servers from the Infoblox out in their DMZ, we have this advanced DNS protection, which is part of the core bundle. And this actually is 2 processors that currently work within the server. One is doing standard DNS responses like any other DNS server, but the other is one that's looking specifically around malformed DNS or specific types of DNS attacks like amplification attacks, which we just talked about, or you're under reconnaissance, so somebody's trying to get your records out of your DNS server, or there's a lot of different exploits. So having that advanced DNS protection sees those immediately as the lower level process within the server, throws them in the bit bucket, and processes the legitimate queries. And the customer has high visibility to what's going on with this, seeing things at certain times of day or over time when certain attacks are occurring by using our report analytics server function, which gives him the reporting or dashboard information to get that visibility, which is another component of the core bundle. So just to briefly give you a quick overview, the attacks that we prevent with advanced DNS protection, or the acronym ADP, is volumetric attacks. So these are those reflection attacks, the amplification, floods, NX domain attacks. So these are very high volume attacks. And then what we have is specific exploits looking around somebody trying to hijack the DNS server or cache poison the DNS server, or known tunnels, such as iodine and some of the others that are out there. So we have 2 types of things that this particular product helps the customer protect. And putting this also on the internal side is very important too, because there's a lot of attacks that are starting to show up now, showing up in the internal network, where infections on clients are affecting the performance of DNS servers, where this actually does a great job protecting also.
You know, that last one on the list that you were just talking about there, Jim, was data exfiltration and, utilizing DNS for that traffic. And also what's really important from a malware perspective to act on is, command and control of the different pieces that are out there. So are they using DNS for that as well? And how often? And, how do we do something about that?
Yes, thanks, Dirk. So let's take you through a couple scenarios of how DNS is so insecure today and should be of concern, and why some customers, say, hey, HTTPS inspection, at the next generation firewalls is the solution I'm going to go with. Is let's just kind of follow the process of a DNS query. So let's just say that I want to query www.hacker.com, and I move through my internal DNS server, and it's not authoritative. It goes to the firewall. It's not on the list of bad domains on the firewall, so it forwards the query on into the internet, where it'll eventually have to be resolved at the DNS server for hacker.com. What will happen here is they'll log the request. They'll now know they have a connection to the internal network. So they will reply normally with an A record. So the A record will be the IP address of a web server that the hacker wants to send the user to, which will come back down and go to that particular user where they now have the IP address to do, let's say, an HTTPS request. Well, that will go directly to the firewall. And a lot of the next generation firewalls have the ability to do HTTPS inspection, where they can actually decrypt the HTTP request and look to see if there's any type of malformed or information that would be necessary to block that request, or even this could be a domain that's known that they want to block. But one of the things that we're starting to see is that some of the vendors are actually embedding the SSL root certificate within the application, the actual operating system of the application they're running. So in this case, what happens is that if HTTPS injection is in place, the session would be dropped. So because it can't be decrypted, because of that root certificate, it can't be deciphered. So what happens is that the firewall has to have an exclusion for SSL decryption of that session. And we're seeing over 100, maybe more now, of specific applications that are now bypassing this particular feature that next generation firewall vendors are really investing in. So that really does lead to say that, you don't want to allow that to go right up to the web server, that having DNS somewhere being blocked for a known site like hacking or exfiltration of data, as we'll see, is very important. Now let's take a look at some of the preventions that we have. So way that hackers are actually stealing data is they'll prepend information. In this case, it's just clear text, but it'll probably be encrypted with a base 32 or 64 encryption, and it'd be a chunk or a segment of data that they're selling for credit cards, personal, intellectual property, whatever it might be. So that query, it looks like a host or subdomain for the domain, in this case, hacker.com. So it won't be authoritative for the internal server, and it will actually, let's say, not be on a list for being blocked at the firewall if it's not a known domain. And when it hits the DNS server for the hacker, what they'll do is they'll log and they'll parse out the actual information, which is the subdomain or the host name information. So as they get each chunk of data, they begin to rebuild their file. Now they actually have a file. Now this can happen in dribs and drabs. It can happen in burst or volume. But the end result is that they steal enough of the file information to recreate it, and then they actually have the data that they've stolen. And there's no indication that's gone off anywhere in the network. So what Infoblox can do is it can actually, when you put us in stream as the DNS server with our RPZ that can check 5 million plus threat indicators, or our deep packet inspection with Threat Insight, and that 5 million plus indicators are all part of Active Trust, and that's part of the core bundle we're talking about here. Is that we can inspect that initially and see if hacker.com's on the network, on the list. If it is on the list, we'll block it. If not, the next thing it's going to do is look deeply into the packet to see that there's something about this subdomain data. We're going to look at using our algorithms for, is it a lot of data going to the same site? Is it encrypted? Is it a certain size? There's a lot of analytics that go into this, and then at that point in time, we'll make a decision and begin to block that specific subdomain. And that's kind of important because when you just block a domain, let's say with a firewall here, or just with RPZ, you block the whole hacker.com. And a lot of the stuff that hackers are doing is they're putting it in actual valid domains like Amazon Web Services and so forth, which you don't block. Those are on, on the Alexa 1000 sites, and they actually are allowed to go through. A notification would go to the SIM if we do block, and this is a really excellent zero-day solution of using our Threat Insight, and then also you can use that in combination with our RPZ which could do 5 million indicators. It is important to point out that it is the best place to do it because we're a special purpose security solution, so we can actually check more indicators of compromise, whereas, let's say, next generation firewalls have a limited amount of memory that they can allocate because they're doing so much else that they need to do, which is very important for the customer. So we're really complementary to that solution. Now, for customers that don't really want to modify their DNS infrastructure by placing us here as the internal DNS server, you have an option to provide this for the customer in the cloud. So we can then force all DNS from the firewall to go to our Active Trust Cloud solution, which does the same function of looking at those 5 million indicators, so that when we do get that subdomain and we do the analytics, we can actually check and then block at that point. And then the additional thing that we can do is if the customer has a lot of roaming clients that are Mac or Windows based, we can actually encrypt the DNS queries and send them also to the cloud. So we protect the customer on-premise and off-premise with this solution. The other thing that we do is because it's a zero-day solution for what I described, there's also additional high process-oriented blocking solutions to look at fast fluxing, which is where the IP addresses are changed very rapidly for the domain names. We spot that, we can block that, and report on that information. Or domain-generated algorithms, DGAs, where we do currently today reverse engineer and put domains that are related to DGAs, but as new algorithms come up that create these domain-generated algorithms, we now have the capability of detecting that as a zero-day solution in our cloud. And then also, the thing you could add is if you did put us in here, we could identify the actual client, and that would add additional ability to locate where the problem is, and put that inform that to the SIM. Give you an idea, just real quick. Here's our way we categorize and separate our indicators of compromise, the domains that we have, and the record sizes to show you that we have a very large, and these are done multiple times a day, and that we can download a very large amount into our appliances, both physical and virtual, that are out there.
So when we talk about what's out there and what we can do about it, the best practices, how do we actually know that these bad actors are happening? I mean, are there specific things that we look for from that perspective, Jim?
Yeah, so queries are one of the things that like, you don't know what you don't know. So a lot of times you got to go back and figure out what's happened. So queries are very useful in doing assessments and looking at the security forensics and getting notifications. And once you strip out the internal domains and the Alexa domains, and you start looking from the top down, you for what's left, you now can see that you have, let's say, a large number of clients going to a specific domain that's been blocked. It's happened over a particular period of time. I mean, you can even identify the IP address of those clients and see how far this compromise is permeated through the internal network. And we do offer that as part of our the core bundle, where we can offer that solution. Now, one of the reasons that a lot of customers don't retain or collect their queries, and this is important, because one of the problems with collecting is it can cause a huge performance hit on DNS servers. So it doesn't matter if it's Infoblox or it's Bind or anybody's DNS server. Is if you do query logging, it actually impacts the performance as high as 80 to 90% on that server. So that, along with the fact that customers have to then parse, filter, and correlate those queries, it makes it extremely difficult, so they don't bother to do it. But the value is there, as I have described. So we do have a solution by using our data collector and our reporting analytics server, which is part of that core bundle. So what happens is our DNS servers, which we call members, actually compress and forward their queries to a VM, which we call our data connector VM. And what this is this will allow you to filter out and correlate that information to put it in a format which is CSV that will be forwarded on to our reporting analytics server, which we've already built so that you can see things like the DNS domain queries by client, which would identify what I just described about that information being sent across the internal network and knowing how bad your compromise is. And for customers that have enterprise Splunk, it's exportable also to the external Splunk enterprise server. We'll be adding some new features later on as we build out our system to give other options. But this is what we have available today, and it's very useful to the customer.
You know, some of the tests, and I talked about this during the sales presentation as well last week, is we have this, you want to validate what we're talking about, right? You want to put some extra time into showing your customers that these threats do exist. And sometimes to be able to do that takes a lot of effort and a lot of work. So to test it with a data exfiltration tool that we built, it's a very light, very efficient way, very easy way of showing exactly that there are vulnerabilities out there without a lot of extra time and effort. And you can quickly show that, wow, you know, we got things turned on at next-gen firewalls, for example, but they may not be doing all the things that we need them to do. And that's why we love being a complementary solution to that. So Jim, I know you're going to go over something relative to the exfiltration portal, and we'll have a separate session, but why don't you give us a quick highlight as far as what that is and how it looks?
Yeah, so our portal, the data exfiltration portal, is called DEX, which is located at dex.infoblox.com. It's only available to internal people such as myself or partners. It's not available to be manipulated by the customer. But what the partner you can do is you can actually set up your customer's account and send them URLs so they get to use this feature, so they can do something simple as taking a file on their computer that they currently have, having the portal then encrypt to create a subdomain for a domain that we'll set up on our server out in the internet here. And then it can be then sent through their DNS server, through their firewall, out to the internet. And then that information will be collected, and then you use HTTPS to bring that back down to your PC to see what was actually stolen. So there's a lot of different techniques. We'll kind of go through that in a more detailed session on another Bloxcast, because I think this is really valuable for you guys to be able to demonstrate. But if you want to get a flavor for this right now, there is a video that when you get this presentation, you'll see an HTTPS link to that. So it's a 10-minute video which will show how it steals data and how you can sit there and just, you know, kind of review the value of this. So Rick, you want to throw that, maybe that last poll question if we have it on?
And here we have it. Please go ahead and answer the question. Now that you have a better understanding of Infoblox's offering on premises and in the cloud, where do you think the customer should focus? Pick the answer that you think is the best and click submit. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, let's go ahead and reveal that. Here we go.
Well, that's good. I think that from a partner point of view, you guys are all in sales also. So this actually adds a lot of value to both you, the partner, because this will increase the sales volume, but your customer is actually going to give them more context. Not only can they protect everything as before it even leaves the internal network, but it gets a quicker way of identifying the specific devices that are at fault with those incidents of compromise. So as a wrap up, I just wanted to let you guys know when you receive a copy of this presentation, there's resources that are available to you, such as data sheets, deployment guides, solutions for what I've talked about today. I encourage you to join our community site because there's a lot of reporting scripts that if the customer does do our reporting server as part of the core bundle, they're going to be able to copy and paste these Splunk scripts and get those dashboards. They can do some quick modifications. We have API scripts. We have a lot of videos there. I also encourage you to sign up at our support site, because when you go to support@infoblox.com, you can get code, download our VMs, fire up our systems. We can work with you to show how you can block and even create, threat insight and quick demos. Get 60-day free licenses. Our technical manuals are there. We have our demo site, which we'll be talking about in other Bloxcasts, where we're coming out with some new demo functionality. The DEX exfiltration site, and then our security assessment, where you can load up some packet captures. And Rick, Dirk, you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you guys for spending the time with us, and also keep in mind, tying it back to, this core bundle concept and the other features and functionality that we have that your customers may not be using today. There's a really large install base that we're taking a look at as a company, and want to work with you to see existing customers that are utilizing our product, but maybe just have the opportunity to expand into these new technologies, plus new customers, of course, and taking a look at it from a security perspective really kind of opens some eyes up as far as really the value and the powerful nature that the Infoblox technologies bring into play. So I thought I saw a quick Q&A question pop up there, but maybe it's already answered. So okay.
One question from Rodrigo. If you have any questions, folks, go ahead and enter them in the Q&A text field. Click submit, and we'll be glad to answer them. And also, Jim, I wanted to mention that we did a special Bloxcast for SEs not long ago, where we did, actually we had Ingmar van Glabik, who did a demonstration of the exfiltration portal. So I'm going to add that to the replay email that I send out to everyone on today's watching today's program, so you'll be able to take a look at that as well. We know that that's a vital tool for SEs, isn't it?
Yes, it really is.
It gives us.
I was doing an answer here.
Okay. I don't see any other questions coming in right now.
And Rodrigo, if you have some specific things that you'd like to speak with us or our product management team relative to the cloud solution, we can certainly spend some extra quality time with you there. So just let us know.
I did want to just say, and I responded to that he was concerned about latency with the cloud, but we are offering 100 user access free pack to our partners to be able to demonstrate and test the cloud. So go ahead and sign up for that. You can do some testing and see what the latency is, but it shouldn't be that high. Yeah,
and in order to do that, engage your channel team or your point of contact. So this 100 user, this is something that, it's the real deal, and we expect that some eyes will open. You can obviously use it for your own use as well, not just from a demo purposes perspective. We'd love you to kick the tires and take a look at that with us. So please engage us for that.
I don't see any other questions coming in right now. I think we might have answered them in the course of the presentation. So if you do have any follow-up questions, you can go ahead and send those to respond to the email invite that you got. I'll be happy to forward those on to our panel and let them take it forward. So let's turn now to Brandon and hear his send-off. Brandon?
Great, thanks, Rick. And thanks to Jim and Dirk for a fantastic presentation. I know all of this information, there's a lot of depth to it, so hopefully you'll have a chance to also review the recording and the information that we'll send out. But coming up next month, be sure to be on the lookout for the invite. Our next presentation will be on February 1st, and will likely be around the reporting topic, which is a component of many of our solutions, many of our quick win plays that we'll likely be reviewing. But we're still working on confirming that topic, but the 1st of February will be the Infoblox Bloxcast SE for sales, and then on the 8th of February, we'll have the Bloxcast for SEs. So those two presentations both will be coming up. Also, if you didn't get a chance to view this, the edition of Partner Pulse, our partner newsletter, there's a lot of valuable information, including information on that Active Trust Cloud 100 user pack. More details on that in the Partner Pulse. We'll include that in the follow-up communication as well. Thanks again to everybody for joining us. We appreciate your participation, and we look forward to seeing you on the next Bloxcast.